Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
And essentially we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is life illuminated. By Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan. Acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians, a Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology, look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker, the guest host for this episode of the program. Today we're excited to welcome as our guest from the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota, Mr. Marty Fleischhacker, the Senior Financial Fraud Ombudsman. Try to get that word out. And Marty is also the Civil Enforcement Liaison from the Department of Commerce. I think, Marty, you're the first guest that we've had on Access to Democracy to speak on behalf of the Department of Commerce. So we're very happy to have you here and welcome, and we look forward to a discussion today on a variety of topics, but in particular, the role that the Department of Commerce plays here in the state of Minnesota for our citizens, and the specific role that you have as your mission in working for them. So I think we have the mission statement of the department ready to go up on the screen. So we can, there it is. You know, when I was researching this program and I looked up the mission statement, I thought this is a pretty profound statement, and it's pretty comprehensive in terms of what the department is charged to do. What are your thoughts about how the department is organized and how it functions to fulfill that mission?
Well, I've worked at the department over 21 years now, and for years before we moved buildings, we had a plaque right inside the door that had our mission statement, and really it's truly what we do every day. We help consumers. We make sure that businesses operate in Minnesota in a fair marketplace, and you know, we're advocates for consumers. We're also a resource both for our licensees, businesses. You know, we participate with other regulators around the country. We're a little unique in Minnesota. There are only a handful of agencies like ours around the country that have a lot of different industries. It's 20-some industries that we regulate, and so we play a large part. We're largely engaged in the financial market in Minnesota.
Yeah, 20 plus areas of regulation is quite comprehensive, and I won't ask you to name all 20 of them, but maybe you can name a few of the larger and the more important ones for the constituency.
I don't want to say these are more important. They're all important, but for years, for most of my career, I was an insurance regulator. I investigated in insurance companies and complaints with respect to insurance agents or claims adjusters, things like that. We also have securities, real estate, mortgage, appraiser, real estate appraisers, debt collection industry, and then, you know, we have a whole bunch of other ones: debt management, debt settlement companies. We do the notary enforcement for the Secretary of State's office, and bullion coins. I think we're the only state in the country that regulates bullion coins. We were kind of a hotbed of bad bullion coin, and bullion rounds, things
Yeah.
like that. We had some bad people doing business here.
What about cryptocurrencies? Anything in that area that the department is concerned about?
Well, that's a different section. I'll let them refer to that.
Fair
but
enough. Okay. Okay. How many people work in the department? Do you have a count?
It's somewhere in the 300 range, I think, between 300 and 350. We're one of the smaller agencies in the department. For all the industries that we have, we are a relatively small agency.
But 300 to 350 is still a pretty good size of an operation that we have, right?
Yeah, but there are other states that have, significant amount of people just to regulate insurance, and we do things pretty efficiently in our state. People wear different hats at times, and I know I've had to wear lots of different hats.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned that you've been with the department 21 years. Congratulations on your service there.
Getting close to, yeah.
What have been some of the more interesting areas that you've worked in while you've been with the department?
When I started with the department, I was on what we called the caller response team. Now they call it the Commerce Service Center, and it's basically the team that receives inquiries, some complaints, and phone calls from consumers. It was a great job, one of the best jobs I've ever had at Commerce, because at the end of the day, you went home, you felt good, you had tangible results, you helped people, you answered questions, you referred people to other agencies if you couldn't help them, and things like that. And then up until my current position, I was assistant commissioner in charge of all of enforcement for 5 years. And that was with that many industries, and you ask a lot of questions because you can't know the ins and outs of every one of those industries, and it was a complicated and fast 5 years for me. There was no downtime. Yeah.
Well, with that kind of experience and that depth of knowledge about all of these different operations, I can see why they would want you to be in charge of fraud and scams and all kinds of deceptive practices and traps that may be out there for the consumer. And that's what I'd like to focus on in our conversation today. Your role in the area of looking after preventing and looking into scams and frauds and anything that might take advantage of victims in the wrong way. So let's start by looking at why the department is so active and so concerned and devoting the resources and your efforts into these areas, the fraud and scam. Why is the department doing that?
So a couple things, and we're going to talk about a new law that was passed in 2018 shortly here, but to start it out, the commissioner goes around the state. This commissioner is very active, and he does a lot of outreach, and he goes out and he has listening sessions, and he talks to business leaders and elected officials, tribal leaders. He's out talking to Minnesota residents, and one question that he gets asked all the time is, what do you, because you have such a footprint in the financial industries, what are you doing to prevent different types of fraud and financial exploitation of older Minnesotans? And that's why the commissioner created my position. Other agencies have done the same thing under Governor Walz. They've assigned people to help fight fraud. There's more fraud that takes place. Younger people actually are victims of fraud more often than older Minnesotans, but for much smaller amounts, and they can make the money back up. Unfortunately, over the years that I've worked at Commerce, I was involved with the Commerce Fraud Bureau. That's 17 licensed police officers that we have in our department. They do a fantastic job. They have a 100% conviction rate. Their main jurisdiction is insurance fraud, but they will also help when we get cases of other types of fraud or illegal activity. They'll help triage it and get it to a local jurisdiction, and sometimes they'll help to work the case. Then we also have our civil investigators for all of our different industries who've always worked on fraud cases too, and refer them over to our criminal people, as well as taking a civil action. So, having those resources available to me, when we get reports of fraud, we can really do a lot to investigate the fraud and help to move it along and try to prevent some of the stuff in the long run, and also put some of the people in jail.
Well, we're fortunate here in Minnesota to have you in the department with those resources and that commitment to look after these scammers and these fraudsters. I know you travel around the state and you work with a lot of different organizations to help create awareness and education and what to look out for. What are some of the organizations around the state that you work with in this area?
We're lucky in Minnesota. We have some fantastic organizations. As you know, you and I both are volunteers with ARP.
Right.
And that's where we met the first time. But I also work with the Better Business Bureau. I work with the Minnesota Elder Justice Center. They do a fantastic job. And then also I work with a lot of other state agencies, the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, the DHS, the Department of Health as well. So. And then I'm also part of a multidisciplinary team in Ramsey County where we get together and it's law enforcement and it'll be a county prosecutor and they'll have adult protective services people. So, you know, I'm really trying to get out there and work with everybody I can so that we can, you know, use our strengths to help people in any way. You know, you get referrals that I can't help people. That's not, we had one person who was a victim of a scam who was suicidal. I don't have the skill set to deal with that, so we made sure we got it to somebody quickly who had that skill set and they could deal with helping that person.
Well, it's a great cooperative effort with all of these other organizations that you can work with. And I'm sure that the impact that you're making is a very positive one, and yet the mission is not accomplished. How much you get done, there's always more to do and always new things coming on the scene. Some of the more common scams that you work with are like the fake lottery and the grandparent call where the grandchild is in desperate need of money and investment scams. Can you talk a little bit about each of those, maybe an example or two, and how the department and you can work with the victims of those scams?
So it's unfortunate, but I speak to, you know, I talk to people. People call in or write into us, or else we'll get a referral from a business in Minnesota. So I talk to a lot of victims personally, and the most that any victims lost that I've talked to is $750,000. You know, but I've had a lot of victims, a few thousand, and a lot of people somewhere in the $50,000 to $400,000 range. And so, you know, that's devastating. People lose faith in others. They become untrusting. Some of the people who had paid off homes and they were debt-free, they mortgaged everything, or they lost their home because they gave it all away to a scammer. So, you know, like you said, do we see all the different types of scams? Yes. You know, a lot of people get that grandparent scam. Every time I go around the state and I talk to people and do presentations at churches, I do presentations at senior centers or at assisted living and other types of residencies, 55 and older residencies. And I run into people, every single one that either was a victim of a grandparent scam or they know somebody. That's universal. It's one of those scams that cost people $500 to somewhere around $2,500. Again, I meet people all the time, but I get the inheritance scams, you know, and you know what the grandparent scam is. Somebody calls up and they say, I'm your grandson or your granddaughter and I was in an accident in Chicago, that's why it's affecting my voice, or I'm in a jail in Mexico and I'm stressed out. And the people who are victims I talk to, they say, it sounded like Johnny, or it sounded like, you know, Jody, or whoever it is that purports to call them. They're imposters. And so they believe it, and they're supposed to act fast, and if they slow down a little bit and just made a phone call, they wouldn't be victims. But these people are good. If they aren't good, they don't get paid. So they are very good actors. But I get inheritance scams. You know, a woman lost about $250,000 to an inheritance scam. She thought she had money coming, and she showed me the documents, and they were pretty convincing looking documents, and these people have a good story. The most heart-wrenching for me are probably the romance scams, because people believe that they've found their somebody that they're going to be living the rest of their life with, or potentially getting married to the person. The scammers target people who are divorced or widowed. About 40 to 75 years old are the victims that they choose, and I see people lose just incredible amounts of money, and it's so hard for me to convince them they're the victim of a scam, because they're so emotionally attached to this actor on the other end of the phone, or more importantly, probably email or text messaging, because most of these scammers won't talk to them or use FaceTime or anything like that, or they'd be identified, but they're very good actors.
Yes, they are, and it's so sad how they are effective in taking advantage of vulnerable victims. In your work with people who have been victimized, do you see any common attributes or situations that make certain people more vulnerable than others that we should be aware of?
Well, good traits for us to have are honesty and trust and being nice, things like those. And those are the things that the scammers exploit.
Right,
okay?
right.
They exploit that, the things that we want others to be. And so they're the ones that answer the phone, and they'll engage in a conversation with a scammer. And then another thing I see time and time again is people who are socially isolated. They don't have a network of friends or family that they can rely on, and it's unfortunate, because if you're lonely, then you're going to be more willing to engage in that conversation with the person who's on the other end of the line that's going to try to rip you off, or engage in that email or text, or if they send you a Facebook a friend request, that's another way they reach the eventual victims.
Sure, and it's kind of logical that those are the kinds of targets that these very professional scammers look to identify. And it's probably a numbers game. I mean, the scammer may make 100 or more contacts before they really get a victim on the line that they can work with. So is that some things that you would anticipate?
Yeah, it is. And the other thing we see is you'll see a section of the state where it seems like the scams are affecting a whole bunch of people in that area. And the scammers, just like regular marketers, they work off marketing lists. And when you answer that phone, they check it off. You answer the phone, your name's worth more than the person who doesn't answer the phone, and you're more likely to keep getting more and more calls. I know at work, because of my position, I answer those emails that you get, where you're going to get this Nigerian prince that's going to send me a whole suitcase full of money, and I get those emails all the time, and I click on them to see what the current scams are. My personal phone, I don't get that stuff because I don't answer my personal phone, and my personal email, I don't answer those emails. But at work, when that stuff comes, I click on it, and I see more and more and more of that stuff. But it helps me to stay abreast of what people are, what types of attacks that people are suffering.
And you have to be watching all the time, because there are new ones that come through constantly.
And new twists on old ones.
Yeah.
I mean, the Nigerian prince, that's been around for couple hundred years at least, and it still works.
Still works.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned that sometimes there are pockets or areas that the scammers concentrate in, and there was some news recently about Dakota County, or Egan, where there were total losses that the police had reported in the neighborhood of $400,000 this year. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't all one person that was victimized, but that's still a lot of money. So working scams and fraud schemes, it's very profitable, it seems like. So, and they're really hard to catch. They're really difficult to track down and to prosecute and get punitive actions against them. Do you have any ideas, thoughts about why that's the case? Why they're so difficult to track down?
It's complicated. We could talk for half an hour just about that.
I'm
but
sure.
these people
I'm sure
are
we
really
could.
good at hiding their identity, and they're often in other countries, so they're hard to find. They operate by email. They're able to mask their identity. When it comes to sending money, they'll use what they call money mules. Sometimes it'll be a prior victim that they'll have help them move money. That person will get the money here, they'll take their 10% and they'll send it on to another country. And this is worldwide crime we're talking about. And as you say, this stuff is prevalent. The ARP has the Fraud Watch Network. If you click on their website, if you go to the Better Business Bureau, the scam tracker, and you just look on there, every day people report, or go to the FTC, but every day on the Better Business Bureau, they report scams that were attempted or successful. And you can see, it's the whole country wide, or you can narrow it to just your neighborhood, and you'll see that, the biggest product scam right now, or the biggest purchasing scam, is pets. People buy pets in other states, and then they pay to have the pet flown here, but then the pet gets flown, there's no pet in the first place. But
Right.
somebody calls and said the pet ended up instead in Philadelphia, and now you have to pay this special fee because it's cold there for this new pen that's warmer, and you get your money back. Well, you don't get your money back. There's no pen, there's no dog, and then they claim that if you don't do it, then you're going to be abusing the animal, and then the animal got sick, so you need a veterinarian, and people send a couple $1,000s on these scams because you get emotionally involved in these pets, and that's just one type of product. There are all sorts of product frauds that weight loss stuff, pills that don't work, and things like that. You could go on and on and on. I saw one list with 450 different types of scams on it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Truly amazing. And it was interesting how you were describing, just using the pet scam as an example, that initially there's the cost to buy the pet. That's the first step. And then as this process evolves, the scammer builds on that, and I need more money for this, and I need additional money for that. And with each step, the victim gets drawn further and further into the scheme, and it's like, I've got to keep this going, otherwise I know I've lost everything I have in it to begin with. And I'm so hopeful that I'm going to get this pet or whatever the product is, that our commitment just, fogs up our reasoning ability to understand what's really happening.
And that's exactly right. I'm a marketing major for my undergraduate degree, and one of the things that people use are commitment. They get you to commit to something small, and then you'll commit again and again and again. And eventually it's like, well, I'm this far in, so I need to keep moving. They'll get 300 from you. And then, with the romance scam, don't worry, I have $2 million in the bank. I just need you to help get me over this hump. Then I'm going to reimburse you. There are a lot of these prepayment type scams, and the lottery included, where you just need to send a little bit of money for the fees and the taxes, or you just need to help me with this one problem that I'm having, and I'll fly to wherever you are, and I'll marry you, and so it's 300, then it's 1,200, then it's 2,500, and then we're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah,
Yes.
we've stopped at the department, over $100,000 money transfer just within the last few weeks.
Amazing. One of the things I wanted to talk about on the program was in 2018 that Minnesota enacted an elder care and vulnerable adult law. That's not the technical name of the bill, but it describes what the bill is about. Can you talk a little bit about what's behind that and how effective it is?
Sure. It took us about 5 years to get the law passed. And essentially what it does, and Maine was the first state to, Judy Shaw in Maine, securities director at the time, was the first one to get the law passed there. And Mike Rothman worked on it for years, and we got it passed a couple of years ago. And what it allows broker dealers and investment advisors to do, and I think this year we're going to get banks and credit unions, and in the future maybe insurance agents and some others. But it's an important law in that they can, if an investment advisor or a broker dealer suspects that they have a client who's being scammed or involved in some financial exploitation, and most of the financial exploitation is committed by family, trusted individuals, and caregivers. So outside of the scams we've been talking about, we also have the people who inside the family who will rip people off. And so what they do is they will report it to us. We'll investigate, and by reporting it to us, as long as it's in good faith, the broker-dealer, investment advisor is protected. They have no administrative or civil liability, and they can delay transactions. And in about a year that we've been doing this, actually it's over a year now, we've only had about 5, maybe 6 instances where we've had to stop transactions, where it was so clear the person was being scammed by somebody. And in doing that, we've really we've helped to save over a few $100,000 by having that law in place. And that's just the ones where I've extended the delayed transaction. Broker-dealers and investment advisors have also had other instances where they've been able to, for a short period of time, delay the transactions to protect the person while they were, convincing them that they were being scammed.
That's just one more tool that we have to work with the consumer to protect them from being taken advantage of. We have the contact information that's been displayed on the screen, email address, the phone number. If someone feels like they're a victim or they are a potential victim, what do you recommend that they do in terms of contacting you?
So we have people on the phone every day from 8 to 4:30. They could always call, and I know you had the number on the screen. My email address has been flashed on the screen, or will be. They could send me an email, and we could, if we can't deal with it because we don't have jurisdiction, it's a family matter or something, we can try to get it to somebody who can look into it. The Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center at DHS in Minnesota, you could also report things to them. If it's other types of abuse, physical or neglect or something like that, people could report it there. I would suggest to report those, but if it's a financial type transaction, report it to us. Most people who have had scams attempted, or when scams have been successful, they don't report it. I think the estimates are between 1 in 6 and 1 in 40, somewhere in there, where people will actually report it. But by reporting it to us or the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, or the FBI, if it's an internet crime, they have FBI has IC3, the Internet Complaint Crime Center, and they collect that information, and then they'll disseminate it or go investigate it and try to stop some of these scams. But it's reporting that information to a law enforcement or some other agency so that we can compile the information and try to thwart some of these scams, and you see some arrests take place worldwide every 6 months to a year.
Well, that's great. Marty, appreciate having you on the program today. Our guest has been Marty Fleischhacker from the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota. Marty, our topic was what the Department of Commerce does for us, and your story lays out a tremendous accomplishment as well as understanding what the mission of the department is. And hopefully the information that you shared today will be interesting and helpful, useful to our audience at Access to Democracy. Marty,
thank you for having me.
Happy holidays.
Yep, same to you.
We wrapped up just on time.